So the ATF has now responded in federal court, and they claim that their pistol brace rule should not be blocked because it's constitutional. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main sponsors of this channel, which is USCCA. Through your membership, you get training, education, and self-defense liability protection. That insurance is really important if you concealed carry, so I highly recommend you take a look into USCCA, and I will leave a link to them down below in the details section and in the pinned comment. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing a lawsuit which challenges the ATF's new rule on stabilizing braces, also known as pistol braces. This new pistol brace rule makes it so that almost any pistol with a brace attached will now be considered an SBR and therefore subject to the NFA's restrictions. In response to the final rule being published, FRAC along with SB Tactical in 25 states have actually sued the ATF and are attempting to get a halt on the enforcement of the new pistol brace rule. Well, now the ATF has filed their response and they put forward their justifications for why they believe their new rule on pistol braces is in fact valid. And their arguments are really hilarious, so we're going to cover some of these. In the lawsuit, the plaintiffs here, FRAC in the 25 states, argue that the rule is a final agency action that exceeds the ATF's statutory authority. The rule regulates pistols and other firearms equipped with stabilizing braces, even though the text, structure, history, and purpose of the NFA and GCA show that the statute does not regulate such weapons. Well, the ATF has now responded and has put forward their arguments for why they believe this court here should not halt the enforcement of their pistol brace rule. In the lawsuit, the ATF argues, over the last decade, firearms manufacturers have marketed devices widely referred to as stabilizing braces. These devices are generally designed to attach to the rear end of a heavy pistol made with a rifle receiver, but no buttstock. Those stabilizing braces are frequently advertised to wrap around or brace against a shooter's forearm to assist them with one-handed firing. Manufacturers often design them to resemble common shoulder stocks and market them so that they may be used to convert pistols into shoulder-fired weapons. The result has been the widespread circumvention of Congress's long-standing requirements for the manufacture and possession of short-barreled rifles. Now, at the very outset of this and the introduction, I kind of want to stop right here. In that very first paragraph in the response by the ATF, you see that the ATF is essentially admitting that pistols with braces on them did not meet the congressional definition of a short-barreled rifle. By calling this a circumvention, that is almost an admission by the ATF that these firearms did not fall under the actual text and terms of the NFA and the GCA, and they didn't apply really until the ATF went in last year to redefine those actual terms, or to essentially do what the ATF says they did, which is a clarification, but really it was them legislating on their own and changing the actual definitions. Then the ATF tries to argue that the plaintiffs in this case do not have standing because they did not present evidence to the court on what braced pistols these plaintiffs actually have. The ATF argues, in fact, the record is devoid of any facts that would allow this court to independently assess the classification of any plaintiff's brace-equipped weapon under the terms of the statute. That omission is telling, they say. If the court were to conclude that a plaintiff was in possession of a short-barreled rifle within the meaning of the NFA, any purported injury to the plaintiff would not be traceable to the rule at all, but would instead stem solely from the statute, as the rule is purely interpretive. So the ATF argues that the plaintiffs would have to submit the type of firearms that they actually have and possess, and then the court here would have to analyze whether or not those firearms are in fact SBRs, and under the court's own eyes, whether or not those items are covered under the text of these statutes. And the ATF claims that that would need to happen prior to these plaintiffs actually having standing. To me, this is kind of a strange circular attempt by the ATF to claim that there is no standing here for these plaintiffs. How would the court here be able to analyze if the firearms are in fact SBRs? Well, they would have to do the very thing that they're actually doing in this lawsuit and what this lawsuit is seeking. They would look at the statutes and any relevant regulations. But they wouldn't even be able to do that without looking at the underlying question of this very lawsuit, which is whether or not the regulation that the ATF just put in place, this new rule, is in fact valid or not. The very issue of this case is whether or not that regulation and this new definition and new clarification and interpretation, whatever you want to call it, is in fact valid. So here, this is kind of just a weird attempt by the ATF to try to get out of this whole lawsuit by claiming that the plaintiffs here don't have standing. But really, in my opinion, it's just a circular argument and kind of just begs the question. But the main thrust of their arguments is that the statute here is clear and not ambiguous. They claim that the term rifle does in fact include braced pistols in certain configurations. Then the ATF addresses the rule of lenity and that whole concept and issue, which has been raised in other lawsuits like Cargill, Vanderstock, and a lot of their other cases as well. The ATF states, lenity comes into operation at the end of the process of construing what Congress has expressed, not at the beginning as an overriding consideration of being lenient. They go on to state that plaintiffs take issue with the NFA and GCA's definition of rifle. However, that definition is not so ambiguous as to leave the court merely guessing what Congress intended. They claim the rule tracks the statutory definition and merely clarifies how ATF will determine whether a brace-equipped weapon is intended to be fired from the shoulder. Nothing in this regulatory framework suggests a grievous ambiguity. So in this section, they try to run away from the use of the rule of lenity by arguing that the text here is so very clear in their favor that the court doesn't even need to get into this whole issue of the rule of lenity. Instead, they believe that just looking at the text of the NFA and GCA would show that braced pistols are in fact rifles and SBRs. Then finally, in closing out their brief, the ATF tries to explain away their inconsistent opinions on braced pistols which they've issued in the past. They state, contrary to the plaintiff's suggestion, prior to the rule, ATF had not uniformly classified braced-equipped weapons as not subject to the NFA. ATF had not even adopted a standardized analysis for determining whether a stabilizing brace changes a weapon's classification and had issued varied classification determinations for brace-equipped weapons, classifying some as short-barreled rifles and others as not. The most significant change the rule represents, then, is a shift from a system of inconsistent ad hoc analysis to a consistent analytical framework. So what they are saying there is that all of this prior guidance and their prior guidance letters and the conversation and the discussions prior with the ATF and the letters that they've issued essentially mean nothing. They say it doesn't matter what they said prior because this was not a standardized analysis. It wasn't an overarching analysis of what they're claiming now. And only now with the issuing of this final rule have they now standardized their analysis. Essentially what they're saying is, forget what we said before. This is our final word. Trust us now. This is what we really meant all along. And it's for all these reasons that they claim now that this federal court should not grant a preliminary injunction which would block the new pistol brace rule from being in full force and effect. Again, after reading the ATF's arguments, I think there is a very good shot of a preliminary injunction being granted, but we will have to wait and see how this court or maybe some other courts that are hearing some other challenges to the pistol brace rule will ultimately decide and whether or not they will agree that this is clearly ATF overreach. But if anything else happens, of course, I will let you all know. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm or fuel Al Gore's rhythm for all of you OGs. It signals to the YouTube algorithm that you guys see value in these videos, in this type of content, in this type of 2A news. And I also want to thank everybody so much for everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.